Brothers and sisters in the faith, today in the gospel, Jesus is passing through towns and villages, teaching as he goes, as he journeys to Jerusalem. If you met the earthly Jesus and you had one question, what would it be? I wonder if it would be the same question as this someone in the gospel asks today. I mean, I've thought about it. If I had a chance to ask the earthly Jesus a question, and I'd ask him something like, why did you create scorpions? It's the most hideous thing I've ever seen. You know, it's funny because I've had that question, and when I was in my undergraduate studies at Mount Angel Seminary, I didn't ask the question, but one of the monks had the answer as he sat in kind of a European way of teaching. He would sit at the desk and lecture, didn't really write much on the board, and you had to pay attention. And he said to us, most of what you're going to learn is coming from the readings I assigned to you, so that's where it comes from. But he did say one day, the male scorpion is good for the female scorpion. Later, when I was home on break, I don't know, some talk show was on TV in the main room, and they were milking scorpions for venom to make anti-venom to make anti-venom and to make possible treatments for different kinds of cancer. And it's like, okay, Lord, they have a purpose, but I don't like them. I don't like them. Maybe if I was to get more serious, if I had one question to ask the Lord, I'd say, I'd ask, is my dad with you? Because I haven't received that private revelation. The only private revelation I've received as far as anyone being in heaven from my family that is deceased, other than I don't need a private revelation, those children that died after they were baptized before the age of reason. I know they are in heaven. I know it. They are saints among the people of God, of the chosen. But I would ask him, is my dad there with you? What would you ask him? This person asks something that many of us would ask. He says, will only a few be saved? Well, how many are saved? How many will be saved? Will it only be a few? And Jesus doesn't give a direct answer, but he says, strive to enter the narrow gate. Strive to enter the narrow gate. The questioner may be thinking that only the Jews had the opportunity to be saved. But Jesus lets us know that the kingdom is inclusive, not only in this reading, but even in the first reading, 500 years before his birth. We hear about the ancient people of God conquered, sent to Babylon in exile. By the time this is written, that we hear about today, there are probably 2 generations in Babylonian captivity. And we hear that there will be others from the nations that will join those ancient people of God in praising God. And here's the amazing thing about it. It says, some I will take as priests and Levites. Now this would be unbelievable to the Jewish people of that time. Some from the foreign nations, Gentiles, will be taken as priests and Levites. And this is the priestly class among the Jews, the Levites. Certain tribe of Levi. Who are those priests? Well, I think he's talking about the priesthood of Melchizedek, the priesthood of Jesus Christ, the realization of the priesthood in the post-resurrection church, the priesthood I now share. Because I'm a Gentile. I mean, by Jewish standards, as far as I know, I mean, I may do the 23andMe someday, find out if I have any Jewish blood in me. But as far as I know, I'm completely a Gentile from non-Jewish people, a descendant of non-Jewish people. He said some of those will be priests and Levites. These are foreigners. These are Gentiles. Strive to enter the narrow gate. Strive to enter the narrow gate. How do we do that? Will only a few be saved? Strive to enter the narrow gate. So we don't have this direct answer. But in the 7th chapter of the book of Revelations, it says that the faithful are in the kingdom, and there are too many to be counted wearing white robes, holding palm branches in their hands, which is a symbol of victory, from all the nations of the world. Strive to enter the narrow gate. In Greek, that word strive is agonizme. Agonizme. Do you hear the English word embedded in there? Agonize. Agonize to enter the narrow gate. Strive to enter the narrow gate. Fight against the ways of the world to enter the narrow gate. Fight against selfishness, self-centeredness, greediness. Gosh, I mean, you just flip on the TV and there's, hey, this is what you need to be happy. And at least for me, I'd say, hey, I tried some of those things. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. It won't make you happy. Yeah, you might have some momentary pleasure, but deep down, you will agonize because you'll wonder, what is missing? Strive to enter the narrow gate. Father Mike Schmitz posted a YouTube video recently where he spoke about the dead and the proper repose of their bodies. He shared something that puts this striving, this agonizme, into perspective. Now, I haven't been to this church, and the next time I go to Rome, I'm going to this church. I'm probably, if I'm with a group of pilgrims, I'm probably not going to bring them with me because I just don't know what effect this will have on them. But I want to go because I think this church, for me, will put things in perspective. You know, St. Benedict said, ponder on your death and you will never sin. And there are saints like Hermano Pedro and St. Francis that would look at a human skull, pray, and they'd say, if you see that as your proximate end, you will find the perspective you need to strive to enter the narrow gate. But it's not for everybody. But this church is in Rome, and it's called, I mean, I guess, casually, the Bone Church. It is a Capuchin chapel. Capuchins are one of the many branches of the Friars of St. Francis. And in this Bone Church, the interior's made up of human remains of the friars that have gone through this order. I believe the church was built around the 1600s. There's over 3,700 skeletons making up all the artwork in the church. Not for everybody to go and see. It's just not. Now, I have seen in the shrine of Hermano Pedro down in Guatemala a skull under glass, and I have seen human skulls in Cambodia. It wasn't the same kind of display we're talking about in the church. We went to one of the concentration camps that was under the authority of Pol Pot. And at the end of the tour of this heinous, evil place, there was a display in the shape of the country of Cambodia, all in human skulls. And when I looked at it, having a background in, outdoor activities and so forth, and it's like, those aren't plastic skulls. Those aren't replicas. Those are real human beings, the remains of real human beings. So the Bone Church is in Rome. And the archway under which you pass says this. And this is the folks that are there speaking to the folks that come in. What you are now, we once were. What we are now, you will be. What we once were, you are now. What we are now, you will be. For me, it puts things in perspective. Again, St. Benedict, ponder on your death, and you will never sin. Strive to enter the narrow gate. How do we strive to enter the narrow gate? Just a few suggestions today. Where do we start? Beautiful hymn that we're going to sing for the preparation of the gifts, Leaning. I don't know if it's a variation. I'll have to ask David Morris when I have a chance, of the Protestant hymn, Leaning on the Everlasting Arms, but that phrase is embedded in the refrain for this song, Leaning on the Everlasting Arms. If you ever saw the second, most recent, True Grit, that theme song plays throughout the movie. And it was a good movie, a good remake. I love both True Grit, the original with John Wayne, and this True Grit, and the differences and similarities between the two. And the second one had this difference, and it was Leaning on the Everlasting Arms. And the main character, Maddie, I don't know in the movie if she really leaned on the everlasting arms. The Maddie in the original one, I can see it. I can see it. But I think the Maddie in the second one was more about getting her will done than anything else. And you can see that at the end of the movie. I won't, even though the movie's over 10 years old, I won't ruin the end of the movie for you. But leaning on the everlasting arms, that's how we start the striving. Realizing we don't have the power. We don't have the strength to enter the narrow gate without help. We have to lean on the everlasting arms. And like I said, a few suggestions. We can start with obeying the commandments. Obeying the commandments. I was talking to a priest. Many of you saw the movie Father Stu. He knew Father Stu personally, and he said when Father Stu got up to give a sermon on a weekday during the Liturgy of the Hours at Mount Angel Seminary, he simple homily. He had a rubber band around his waist, around his wrist, and he said, how do we deal with sin in our lives so we would do good, something of that effect. And he just snapped the rubber band, and then he stepped down. How do we start striving for the everlasting way, or the narrow gate? We could start by obeying the commandments, and then maybe, I don't know if this works. I haven't tried it. We fall into sin or temptation and we snap that band. Maybe you can tell me if it works for you. But obey the commandments. And we remember that we are saved through grace, through faith, through the sacraments of the church. That's part of the striving. We invest ourselves, we involve ourselves, we immerse ourselves in faith and grace and receive grace, right? That's the leaning on the everlasting arms, all of it is. And the sacraments of the church, they are salvific. And then we think about those, maybe if this helps you, arrayed in that chapel, all those Capuchin friars, 3,700 of them on display, and realizing that what they are, we will be. Of course, at death, there's a separation of body and soul, and someday our body will be rejoined to the soul at the end of time. But how do we do that? We can ponder on that and say, what did they do? Now, we're not religious. We're not living in a community. We don't live the religious life. But what are some of the things they do and they did to enter the narrow way? Strive like these to enter that narrow way. Let's not miss the opportunity.